Their coming together could be their undoing.
How you get so big getting food of this kind?
Hello and welcome into this spoiler review for Star Wars The Mandalorian Chapter 7, The Reckoning. As I said, there will be many a spoiler in this review. One thing there will not be spoilers for, and I will get this a little bit out of the way first. This particular episode is dropping on a Wednesday today and not a Friday, and after the episode you have the chance to watch a sneak peek for The Rise of Skywalker. I did not watch it. No, I don't want to hear about it. I am expressly avoiding anything to do with The Rise of Skywalker. I'm seeing the movie tomorrow, so there's literally no reason at all for me to watch a clip tonight. I'm not going to talk about it, and please don't talk to me about it. I'm on a sequel trilogy cleanse, so I can go into the movie with fresh eyes. But with that little bit of business out of the way, let's talk spoilers for this episode. This episode was absolutely phenomenal, and it seems to be a two-parter with the final episode. Before we kind of get into the story itself, I kind of want to talk about what the overall structure of the show seems to be. This season started with 3 episodes that were kind of like their own story. We're ending with 2, so that's 5 episodes that were a part of a grander scheme, leaving 3 in the middle to kind of be their own little things. And their own little stories. I personally like this. I think I said in one of the reviews earlier in the season, if you look back at something like X-Files, it had the big conspiracy theory episodes that tied into the larger narrative of the show, but then it would have Monster of the Week episodes. I like that this show is doing that. I think where it suffers is that there's only 8 episodes in the season, so that's what kind of creates this sense that things are disjointed. I think when you had something like X-Files or any number of shows that did something like this, it was back in the day when you would have 20 episodes a season at least. Only having 8, it makes it a little bit tougher to get that feeling. Because we know we're getting a second season. I hope the second season is more than 8 episodes. And that's not to say that I've had a problem with what we've had. Like I said, I really like that we have big picture episodes and standalone episodes. And I like that we've gotten to spend time with our bounty hunter doing bounty hunting things. I just think that even making it 10 episodes instead of 8 would have had a little bit more room for everything to be fleshed out. But at the same time, this is the first season of the first Star Wars live action TV show. I think it was probably smarter to, have less episodes so they could use their budget, which was large, but use their budget wisely and more directly. Now that we're hitting the end of the season, even if it's not the last episode, we can kind of see that the last episode will be, we're not going to just have a random bounty episode next week. So I kind of want to talk about that. And I overall like the structure of the show, and I like that we get both kinds of episodes. I just wish we had more. I don't even really mind the episode length. It was one of my gripes from the pilot, but to be honest, every episode I thought they've managed to fit in so much content in a half an hour versus like 45, even 50-minute episodes that you'll see on some Netflix series. I don't feel like at any point in time the stories we've gotten have been truncated. So I think the duration of the episode, as much as I like longer stuff, has been really good for the series. I just wish that we had more episodes therein. But I don't know if the number of episodes has been announced for season 2 and how successful this has been. Maybe they could get more. So we'll see how all of that comes about. But pre-production's done so far in advance that it might be too late to add more, but we'll see how it all shakes out. But with that, let's start talking about the episode itself, and there is much to talk about. At the very beginning, we see Greef Karga calling to make a deal with Mando. We'd kind of seen him last week in an older message form, so, we're again seeing him as a hologram. We haven't seen him since the 3rd episode, Deborah Chow's previous episode. She's back directing this one. And now he's willing to make a deal with the Mandalorian, or so we think. Now, many of us were probably suspect right from the get-go with this, and we were not wrong to be suspicious of this call. As I said, I'm assuming you have watched the episode, so I'm going to kind of talk to you with the all-knowingness of having finished the episode. But right from the get-go, it seems like there's probably more going on than we know with Greef. The Mando doesn't have a choice. He has to do this, and it's something he'll tell Cara in a minute. He can't keep running from these bounties forever. He needs to be able to stop and figure out what on earth he's going to do with raising this little kid. So now that the Mando has a chance to clear his name with the Bounty Hunters Guild and get some rest is something he'd really want to do, especially because the Empire is never going to stop coming after Baby Yoda. Now we return back to the planet that we saw in the 4th episode, the one directed by Bryce Dallas Howard. In case you'd forgotten who directed episode 4, that was Bryce Dallas Howard, for all my friends at Star Wars Reference. We head back there and we see what Cara is up to, and she's really continuing her big Xena warrior princess energy. Like, she's involved in some sort of bar fight with this crazy energy belt, and she's kicking tail. She can hold her own against this mighty Zabrak, the type of Zabrak that's not a Night Brother. He doesn't have the face paint, so he's not the ones that have been conscripted into the Witches of Dathomir. And here, Mando convinces Cara to join him. Basically, he's saying, like, hey, this is this job, I need you to come with me, you know, I can pay you, and we're going to take care of the kid, we're going to do all of this stuff. She doesn't want to go, she's pretty retired, she knows that she's got a death mark, not because of her service in the war, but because of the stuff she's done after. So we can see that she's kind of running from something. She's, you know, needed a place to put her rage, as we see in this bar fight. But it's when Mando mentions that he wants to go up against an Imperial, not just a random warlord, but an Imperial warlord that she's just in without question. So whatever is going on in her past, she really has this giant beef with the Empire, and it's probably not as simple as she was a rebel. There's probably something more there, but we don't really get to know about it in that moment. As they head to space and start flying, again, I like that the Mandalorian opens up his gun case and lets Cara pick out something to use. We've seen in past episodes, you know, people have been pilfering and trying to go through Mando's weapons cupboard, past bounties, the nasty people from the last episode. But here, where Mando has rejected and it's kind of been a mark of death to go through his stuff before, now Mando's like, no, you can use something. He has this profound respect for her. I still read it as them being biffles for many reasons, among which I really do think Cara has big Xena energy in many senses of the word. You know, we don't necessarily know where they're going, it doesn't really matter, but we can see that they're close because Mando's willing to share his weapons with her, something that he has said in the 2nd episode that are a part of his religion. That's an important point. Another thing that's going on here is my son, cute little Yodel, pokes his little head down and is like mischievously looking at them, and then he crawls back up into the ship and he starts trying to fly the ship all on his own. I mean, granted, 50 years old is probably old enough to be a pilot for most people, but clearly he is not yet ready. Though I would make an argument he's never going to be ready if the Mandalorian doesn't give him a chance to learn. But that's such a cute little moment, and that's when Cara's like, we really need to get somebody to watch this kid. Mando really needs a babysitter, and that's when they head back to find the Ugnulti, to find Quill, and they kind of meet up with him. You know, we had seen in trailers and promotional materials different things that hadn't popped up yet. We knew we were going to see Cara again. We knew we were going to see IG-11 again. We knew we were going to see Quill again. We knew we were going to see Grief Karga again. It was just a context of when, where, how, why, just because we hadn't seen everything we'd seen in trailers and posters. So this is now kind of the last bit of stuff. There's still a little bit of dialogue between 11 and Cara that hasn't really been shown in the show, which is presumably going to be next week. Knowing this was coming, it had kind of been like every episode, is this the one where they're back? Is this the one where they're back? Is this the one where they're back? So now we finally have the one where they're back, and I don't have to keep guessing at this point. Now, this conversation they have in the hut has a couple of interesting takes. One, Quill is talking about Baby Yoda, and the Mando says something about thinking that he was a strand cast. And then Ugnulti talks about how he looks evolved, he doesn't look grown out of a vat. So strand cast seems to imply somebody that was made, somebody who was genetically altered, somebody who was cloned. And the implication is that's not who Yodel is. You know, we're still kind of holding on to that reference to Camino on Dr. Pershing's uniform that we saw in the first 3 episodes. Conveniently, Dr. Pershing is not in this episode, so I wonder if things did not go well for him after the Mando's last visit to the planet of Navarro. But that still kind of is them trying to figure out what the Empire really wants with Baby Yoda. It's here that Quill and Cara have a conversation. See, Cara, we know, hates Imperials. She is on this mission because she hates Imperials. And here we have our friend who's like, no, actually I fought on the wrong side, and talks about how he was an indentured servant and he had to work to pay off his debt to the Empire. So he's somebody who fought for the Empire but didn't want to fight for the Empire. He was somebody who was forced into it. Even though he's forced into it, Cara's hatred for the Empire kind of overshines that, and she doesn't want to trust him all of a sudden. And it's kind of funny because she chides Mando for hating droids so much. She hates Imperials. Maybe that makes sense to her, but the droids certainly make sense for the Mandalorian. It's an interesting follow-up character beat there. But speaking of droids, IG-11 walks in. We knew he was coming back. Here we see he is being reprogrammed from his former self. We are told that he's been redone. He's no longer murderous. He can defend. But he's been rewired and he's being used for a different purpose now. We then get kind of this weird flashback montage of 11 being rebuilt. I mean, it was a cute scene, you know, seeing him learn how to rewalk, seeing him learn how to, like, pour stuff. It certainly shows something we don't see a lot in Star Wars. You know, you'd think the idea is he could just be reprogrammed and he could just do stuff, but seeing him having to kind of be trained and feeding blurgs and that sort of thing was interesting. To be honest, the scene kind of slowed the episode down for me. I didn't really care. Maybe that sounds harsh. It was good enough for me that that 11 was found and reprogrammed. Like, I didn't need to see it. I don't know if that's because 11 is considered more of a main character than we've seen thus far. I don't know if that's because this scene is actually going to be really, really relevant next week to the final episode, in which case I can take it all back. If this is actually setting up something we need to know for next week. But overall, I was just kind of like, I don't know why this is here. I don't know if maybe it's to illustrate more for Quill. I don't know if it's maybe to, you know, add to the ambiguity of, is 11 actually reprogrammed or might he not actually be reprogrammed? So to kind of like create a sense of trust with him. And then we follow up. There's a couple of moments where he's bringing tea to the Mandalorian and he pauses and you can tell he's kind of recognizing the Mandalorian in that moment. And, you know, is that going to be a problem? And there's another moment where he kind of has a stare down with Cara. And he just seemed kind of suspect to me throughout the episode. So I don't know if this montage was meant to counterbalance that. I don't know if I'm just overthinking it and it was just supposed to be a cool scene. But whatever. It wasn't enough to be a killjoy for the whole episode for me, but it was just kind of like, I just didn't understand why it was there. Eventually, everybody gets on board with the plan of going to Navarro and protecting Baby Yoda, so now they're all in space. Mando and Cara are having an arm wrestling thing, and Baby Yoda gets a little bit confused and starts force choking Cara, which was pretty incredible. I genuinely didn't think we were going to see him use the Force again until the final episode, and that it was going to be this big thing where he saves everybody. But here we have this moment, and here we see him using like a dark thing. You know, it's understood in Star Wars that Force choking is a dark sider's power. You know, we've seen him mischievous already in this episode. Now he's just trying something. And I really kind of wonder, like, did he think that Cara was a threat to Mando because they were just arm wrestling? Did he simply want to help the Mandalorian win? And so he was choking her, not understanding that he could actually cause her pain or actually kill her? Like, how much of an awareness of his own powers does he have? Especially because we've seen him try to heal Mando before. We see him heal later in this episode. Even when he's just using the Force to levitate the Mudhorn, in the second episode, that's not necessarily an aggressive act. So to see him have this aggressive act, is it because he's gaining ferocity because of what we saw in the last episode where he was toying with that droid that was trying to kill him and he really wanted to use the Force to destroy it? Like, are we seeing this kind of dark side streak in Yoda, or is it something where he just literally doesn't understand what he's doing? Which is one of the arguments for why Jedi wanted to train younglings at such an age, to have them so soon, because the argument is that people, young ones, won't understand their powers and could cause much damage. Now in the scene, I think it's important to note that Cara reacts to being choked. Like, she doesn't like being choked, but she doesn't react to the Force. You know, she's not like, where'd the oxygen go? Is there a problem with the ship? She was aware that it was Yoda doing it. And I kind of wonder, being in the rebellion, if she doesn't have some understanding of what the Force is, where Mando doesn't seem to at all. Quill, and I might be saying his name wrong, and I apologize. But Ugnulti seems to have heard rumors about the Force. He understands it better once he kind of sees it in action. But I think this isn't just kind of another telling note. I think Kara's probably a little bit more familiar with Force stuff based off of her reaction to what happened. Once again, Cara and Quill get into an argument. This is where he talks about how he was an indentured servant and he had to work his way into like earning his way away from the Empire. And that's something that she kind of has to deal with. So she really has this intense spark about fighting against the Empire. And I like this idea that they all have to kind of come together on this team and learn to trust each other, even to the point where, you know, she trusts the droid, but she doesn't trust Will. And Mando trusts his friend, but he doesn't trust the droid. And so there's all these kind of webs of things going on within the group. It's at this point that they go meet up with Greef Karga. Again, at this point, I was already kind of suspicious. We know now that he's meeting them all the way out there because he has this plot to turn against the Mandalorian and just take Yodel and receive that handsome reward from the Empire. Greef isn't really sure what to make of Yodel. He thinks he might be a zoo animal. He mentions later that he's surprised that he's a carnivore, expecting him to be something else, maybe more of an insectivore or something like that. But you know, it's clear that he really doesn't understand what's up. He knows the kid is valuable, but he doesn't understand why. They're all having the most awkward bonfire ever, trying to go over the plan as we will see it later on when these strange dragon things attack, and it thins the group out a bit. One of the extra bounty hunters gets killed, 2 of the blargs get killed, and Greef gets injured. He's about to die. He's being slowly poisoned by the claw marks on his arm. They don't have enough medicine with them to treat them. Kara is the only one with a med kit. Of course, she's also the only one who's like a prepared trooper, so that kind of made sense. And that's when little Yodel hobbles over and starts to take care of Greef. This is something we had seen him try to do in the second episode. He was coming over to try to heal Mando, but Mando never let him do it because he didn't understand. But here, Yodel is able to save Karga's life. There's a couple of things going on here that are pretty interesting. On the one hand, we have healing. Healing is an intense, always coded as light side power versus the force choking we'd seen earlier in the same episode. So again, it comes back to, is Yodel instinctually using light side, dark side powers in a way where he's not really doing it from a side? He doesn't really understand what he's doing. Is this him trying to make up for attacking Kara earlier by helping one of Mando's other friends? Is there some sort of like emotional intelligence to understand that as some kind of repentance for a thing he did earlier? Either way, it's really cool. And it's a level of healing powers we've not really seen on screen from Star Wars before. We had this understanding that Jedi can heal themselves, that they can meditate, but we've never watched flesh regenerate on screen like that before. So again, is this something specific that Yodel can do? Is this a Yodel power? Or is this something where, because he is both mentally young enough to have belief and believe that he can do it, which is such a big part within the Force, that he isn't limited by can flesh regenerate itself like that, but coupled with being 50 years old and having experience, like, is this something where he can do this and do this more powerfully in a way he might not be able to once he has an adult mind? Or is this just he's special and he can heal like that because that's his particular skill? We don't really know. That's something I'm interested in right now. The 2 little parts I liked here was one when Yodel walks over, Karga's like, he's trying to eat me, which I just thought was a funny response. And then I loved how when Yodel was done, he just kind of like ooped down to the ground, like he was just so tired from what he had just done. They wake up the next morning and reach the edge of town. Here, Greef turns on his own 2 men and admits that this whole thing had been something to betray Mando. Now he doesn't want to do that. He specifically says his mind has been changed because of what happened with Yodel the night before, whether it's just because he understands how special the creature is, understands how much the Empire shouldn't get a hold of him, or just feels indebted because the little guy saved his life, or maybe all of the above. That's not necessarily spelled out, we just know it's because of his encounter with Yodel. And here they make a new plan. Kara is still mistrusting, but they have to kind of go along with it anyway, because Mando understands they have to take care of this Imperial problem or he can never stop running. So they give Yodel to the Ignolti, who starts heading back to the ship. They are, like a day's walk away, so it's going to take him a little while, but he starts heading that way while the rest go into town. Within the town itself, you can see there's a massive Imperial presence that wasn't there before. They can't even get into the city without checking their identity and even checking Greef's identity, and he's somebody who's probably more well known within the city. They have some kind of a humorous exchange as they walk in, and Kara is constantly on edge because there's way more than the 4 stormtroopers that were promised. At this point, we've seen absolutely no sign of the Mandalorian clan that we saw in the 3rd episode, so they've presumably moved on to an entirely different planet, but we don't necessarily know that. And then our heroes head into a bar cantina place to meet with the client, and it's the same place that was the guild headquarters before. So you can see that the Empire lost their headquarters because Mando attacked it and wrecked it, so now they've moved into where the guild was. This can probably be seen as part of the motivation for Greef to go after Mando, because he's losing like his literal territory on this planet. There's a really intense exchange where the client, Werner Herzog's character, makes reference to the Mandalorians and say, why did they resist Imperial rule and the Empire made everything better, and look around at all the craziness you've seen and tell me if that actually makes anything any better. And I think that's part of what the importance of the 4th episode was. There were a lot of things going on in Sanctuary, which was directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, but part of it was to see the kind of anarchy that's followed the New Republic coming to power, just because there's been such a vacuum since the Empire has gone down. I also like this exchange here where the client obviously really wants to see the child, and Karga's like, he's asleep, and the client is just like, we'll be quiet, we'll all be quiet. And I liked it because it could have been a sarcastic line, that could have been a, you're being ridiculous, I'm gonna look at this kid, why do I care if he's sleeping, like, we'll be quiet. Like, it could have been a sassy line, but it actually looked really earnest to me. It looked really like, we will be quiet. And of course, Werner Herzog is a huge fan of Baby Yoda, so that kind of makes sense. As I mentioned, there is no sign of Dr. Pershing, which I think will be relevant in some way. And it is this point that the hologram of Moff Gideon shows up and causes the death of Werner Herzog's character, the client. Now, whether or not he just died because he was in the way and Gideon doesn't care, or if he died because of his own incompetence for not realizing the child wasn't there, we don't necessarily know, but it is very intense. It's at this point that the Mando radios to find out if the child has made it back to the ship, and then 2 scout troopers overhear the communication and go after him. They could even be tracking the signal. I wonder if that wasn't part of Moff Gideon's plan to kind of corner the Mando and not rush in and kill him right away like they could have, especially if they thought the child was in there when he clearly knows that that's not true. I think the point of trapping them in there is to kind of force communication so that they can listen up and go get the child. I still really want to know what the Empire wants with him. Just Gideon's line of, that child will mean more to me than you'll ever know. Like, what is going on? Like, he keeps referencing that they could not possibly understand the gravity of the person they have. And I'm really excited to see how that plays out. Now, at the end of this episode, we're left to wonder if Quill is dead. He certainly looks dead. The musical cue certainly makes it sound like he's dead, but we don't technically know. We could easily get to Chapter 8 and he could pop right back up, but we don't really understand what happened. The blurb he was writing is smoking, like clearly he was shot. The obvious thing is that one of the scout troopers shot him. He fell over, they pick up Baby Yoda, and they run off. But I also kind of wonder if 11 wasn't involved. When watching it, you see that they get back to the Razor Crest and the gate comes down, so the droid wouldn't be locked up in there like the Mando might have wanted. I don't know that I'm fully convinced that he is fully reprogrammed, so maybe he recognized that he was working for the Empire, recognized the stormtroopers coming for Baby Yoda, so he shot down his recreator in order to fulfill the latent programming. Or it could be just as simple as the scout trooper shot him and 11's gonna walk out and see the corpse and then go save them. Like, I think it's gonna end up being one of the two things. 11 is either how they get out of this next week or the reason why they're in this situation at all. But as for me, that episode ended and I was like, excuse me, where's the nearest spaceship? Because I would like to go to space and figure out what happened to my son, because they have just taken him away now. And like, I was really upset when I saw him on the ground. I do not like seeing Yodel on the ground unless he's walking on the ground and like went there of his own free will. Anytime he's just there, I am unhappy. And now we have to wait a week and a half because there's not a new one this Friday. We have to wait until next Friday. Granted, there is a movie that will keep me occupied in that time, but still, I want to know what happens to my son. And I'm actually really curious how much Yodel is going to be involved in the second season. I hope he is greatly involved in the second season or seasons beyond, because he's pretty much the reason why I adore the show. You know, it's also possible that he will be the storyline for the first season and the second season will start off something completely new. But overall, I like that episode except for the end where my son is in peril. I didn't really like that part. a whole lot. But I think it was really solid. I think this is building up to a really fantastic conclusion. I'm really excited to see that. I would love to know what your thoughts are on the episode. Please leave me a note in the comment section. If you're not already, follow us on all the places. And until next time, keep it real and fly casual.
Cooking can be fun!